up next, we have Amaroq Weiss from the Center for Biological Diversity. Amaroq Weiss is the senior wolf advocate with the Center for Biological Diversity. As a biologist and former attorney, Amaroq has worked in wolf recovery and conservation advocacy for the Northern Rockies, Alaska, and Southwest, Pacific West, and at the federal level for the past 26 years. At present, her work focuses chiefly on wolf issues in West Coast states, the Northeastern U.S., and at the federal level. Amaroq was an appointed representative in the two separate processes in Oregon and California to draft those states' wolf conservation and management plans, and successfully argued the case to get wolves listed under California's State Endangered Species Act. Thank you so much. The organization for which she works, the Center for Biological Diversity, is a national nonprofit conservation organization with more than 1.7 million members and supporters that works to protect endangered species and wild places. And I'd just like to also mention that the Center for Biological Diversity is one of our conference sponsors this year, so we love them so much. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Amaroq.
Thank you so much for inviting me. I am speaking to all of you from the beautiful ancestral lands of the coastal Miwok. And this is my attempt to share my screen. We'll start off with that, see how successful I am with that.
Perfect.
That's working. Okay, great. So this is really a 20-minute crash course on California wolves. And in this talk, Steph is going to ask me questions and I will delve into those answers. But first, I'm going to give you a basic primer on wolf presence, eradication, and return in California. Wolves were once widely distributed across California, and we know this from two bodies of evidence. First, we know this from the language, stories, creation, artwork, dance regalia, customs and beliefs of Native peoples across the state. We also know it from the travel journals and diaries of European explorers and settlers, missionaries, and even from bounty records. The settlement of California by Europeans starting in the late 1500s, early 1600s, led to the building of missions, the enslavement and genocide of Native peoples, the importation of vast herds of livestock, a mass of gold miners who arrived in the state in the mid-1800s, the market hunting and decimation of many wildlife species that were then sent as meat back to folks on the East Coast, and the eventual eradication of wolves. Our last two known wild wolves in California were killed in 1922 and 1924. The 1922 wolf was killed all the way down in Southern California in San Bernardino County in the area we now call the Mojave National Preserve. The 1924 wolf was killed much farther north, showing their wide distribution in Northeastern California in Lassen County. But our wolfless landscape changed in 2011. Wolf OR7 from Oregon made his historic journey across the state of Oregon and into California. He remained here for 15 months, returning back to Oregon in March of 2013. He came back into California for a few short visits in late 2013 and early 2014. But by the spring of 2014, he and a mate that he had found in Southwest Oregon produced their first litter of pups. This wolf family was called the Rogue Pack, named in honor of the watershed they occupied. And they had more litters over the next 4 years. Some of their offspring came to California, and some of those established packs here. OR7 is presumed to have died in 2020, and his mate was found dead of natural causes in 2021. But other younger members of the Rogue Pack have kept that family going. Then in 2018, a daughter of OR7 came to California, and she traveled all the way south to Lake Tahoe. In 2021, another Oregon wolf unrelated to OR7 came to California And he traveled south all the way past Tahoe, down to Yosemite. Then he turned west and headed across the entire Central Valley of California, crossing 3 of our busiest, most roadways. And he finally ended up out on the coast in Ventura County, about 2 hours north of Los Angeles. These voyages were nothing short of spellbinding and riveting, and the whole world knew about it because media outlets around the globe reported on the travels of these wolves. But quite recently, there's been another dramatic wolf journey in California. It was reported late this summer that some ecologists who were doing work in the giant Sequoia National Monument discovered a wolf family there, which is 200 to 300 miles south of any of California's other known wolf packs. What they observed was a mother wolf, and evidence was later collected from scats showing that there were at least 4 pups. Since that time, there's been confirmation of the father wolf, and there may also actually be more pups than just the 4 initially reported. But over the years, several other wolves have come to California, and several other wolf packs have been confirmed here. So in late summer of 2015, the 7-member Shasta pack was confirmed in Siskiyou County, though they disappeared mysteriously a few months later. Then in summer of 2017, the Lassen pack was confirmed. You can see it here on this map. This is portions of Northern California from Tahoe National Forest up to the California-Oregon border. The Lassen pack was confirmed in 2017, and they range across portions of Lassen and Plumas County. And then in late 2019, early 2020, the Whaleback pack was confirmed further north up there in eastern Siskiyou County. And then in spring of 2020, the Beckworth pack was confirmed little to the southeast of Lassen pack, occupying portions of Plumas County. And then most recently this summer, the State Wildlife Agency announced the confirmation of 4 new packs. A new one in northern Lassen County, north of the Lassen pack. Another one in a different portion of Plumas County, I think north of the Beckworth pack. A new one discovered this spring in Tehama County, and if you look straight over to the left on the map from the Lassen pack, you'll see where Tehama County is. And then lastly, this new wolf family that was discovered late this summer in Tulare County in Giant Sequoia National Monument. This map shows you the range currently occupied by wolves across the 3 West Coast states, and dropping down here to California, you can see that tiny brown dot at the top is the Whaleback pack. Below that, the Lassen pack and the Beckworth pack, and then all the way down there in the toe there of the Sierra Nevada in Tulare County, that's how far away that new pack is.
Okay, and I would like to ask a question. Is that okay?
You bet.
What can
Now
you
that
tell
you
us?
got the context.
Okay, what can you tell us about the genetics of California's wolf population? Is it sufficiently diverse? Is there a reason for concern?
Well, most, but not all, of the wolves who've dispersed into California and who've set up packs and produced pups here have come from Oregon. Some, but not all of them, are descendants from OR7's Rogue pack. The original Lassen pack female, for instance, she's not closely related to Oregon's wolves. She's actually believed to have come from the wolf population in the broader northern Rocky Mountain region. She traveled quite a distance to get here. The breeding male of the Whaleback pack, he came from a different family line than OR7 did. He came from the Mount Emily pack in Northeast Oregon. And then of these 4 newly discovered packs, the genetics of the Tehama County pack isn't yet known. The genetics of the new pack in Lassen County shows that the breeding female is an offspring of the Whaleback pack. The breeding male's genetics have not yet been identified, but it is known that he's not related to other California wolves, nor to Oregon's Rogue pack. The genetics of the new pack in Plumas County shows that the breeding male and the breeding female both came from the Lassen pack, but not from the same litter, and they have different parents, and that's kind of a complex story we can get into later in Q&A if you want to figure out how they can be from the same pack but have different parents. And then for the new pack in Sequoia and Tulare County, the scat that's been collected there indicates that the wolves, the breeding father is a disperser from California's Lassen pack. And the agency said that the breeding mother wolf is a direct descendant of OR7. So we have some mixing up. It's not just all solid OR7 genes in the state anymore, not all solid Imnaha pack genes in the state anymore. OR7 came from the Imnaha pack, and a number of the lone wolves that came into California also came from there. But now we've had new genes come in from elsewhere, which is a very good thing.
That's so cool. I'm so excited about that. Are there places wolves are showing up and establishing territories that are a surprise, or are there locations something that was predicted? And what areas of California have habitat that's the most suitable for wolves?
Yeah, many of California's wolves have come here from Oregon, and their grandparents or great-grandparents or great-great-grandparents were some of the original wolves that were reintroduced to Idaho in the mid-1990s. So I kind of like to think of those Idaho wolves back then, kicking back in their den in the thick of winter, opening up their laptops, pulling up MapQuest and checking out California, just kind of dreaming of their descendants going west and then south here into the Golden State, just like you have, Steph. And you also were born in Idaho. Wow, there's something going on here. So after OR7 came here, more wolves started coming. And I like to actually think that OR7 maybe bought a timeshare here and sent postcards back to his family and said, hey, the weather's great, come on down here. But really, what this says is that California has great habitat for wolves. And for quite some time, scientists have predicted that wolves would be here, and they predicted where they would end up. Actually, a modeling study that was published all the way back in 2000 looked at suitable wolf habitat in the southwestern Oregon, northern California cross-border region, and determined that this area could support up to 470 wolves. And then after California had OR7 come into the state wildlife agency here, the California Department of Fish and Wildlife, got busy developing a state wolf plan. And so they began to develop a map modeling good wolf habitat. And in drafting that plan, they did produce that map in the plan. And so here is a result of their efforts. So on this map, everywhere that's colored in the darker gray is habitat that's deemed suitable for wolves. So what factors make habitat suitable for wolves? Primarily, it's prey abundance, public land ownership, because that translates into low road density and minimal human population settlements, and then forest cover, because that translates into the likely presence of wild ungulate prey. On this map, in Northern California alone, north of Interstate 80, I don't have a pointer here, so if you can look on that map and see where 80 is, kind of right there at the waist of the state. North of that, this area amounts to 23,200 square miles of suitable wolf habitat. The agency hasn't done a calculation yet for how many thousands, hundreds of thousands of square miles there are below 80. And that's because they weren't expecting wolves to show up quite this soon. So they didn't put that calculation into the plan. But what the agency did do in the plan is they made their own estimates of how many wolves California could support. And they made those estimates two different ways, based on how much wild prey is available, namely deer and elk, and based on the average wolf pack territory size in other states. And so using those two methods, they estimate that the state of California, north of I-80, could support anywhere from around 370 to almost 500 wolves. And they've not yet estimated how many wolves could thrive south of Interstate 80.
Wonderful. Where do you see wolves establishing in California in the next 5 years then?
Well, you can see from this map that there's a lot of territory for wolf packs still to fill in. So I do expect packs to show up both to the north and the south of I-80. Whether wolves will remain in a locale, though, is largely going to be based on whether there's available prey base for them. and whether that terrain invites the presence of adequate prey base for them. As for the continued expansion of California's wolf population, it also depends on how things are going for wolves in Oregon. And you know, Oregon's the main source for California's wolf population. So if you've been paying attention to what's going on in Oregon, and I'm certain many of you have, we've been seeing some troubling trends there. The agency has stepped up and increased its kill orders for wolves that are involved in livestock conflicts. There's been a sharp uptick in wolf poaching in Oregon, including the poisoning deaths of 8 wolves, including an entire 5-member pack just a few years ago. And then all the wolf killing that's occurring in Idaho probably puts a crimp on wolves from Idaho being available to disperse westward into Oregon. So all of those factors are going to play a role in whether or not we continue to see a stream of wolves from Oregon dispersing to California.
Thank you. Since the Center for Biological Diversity was a part of the process, can you give a quick overview of how California's wolves became protected so proactively and what those protections are?
You bet. So in February 2012, which was less than 2 months after OR7 crossed the border into California, the center and allies filed an administrative petition with the California Fish and Game Commission, urging them to list wolves under California's State Endangered Species Act. And then over the next 2 years, there were public hearings that were held. The State Wildlife Agency submitted analyses and reports and recommendations to the commission. We presented scientific and legal arguments to the commission. And in the end, we prevailed. In 2014, the commission granted full State Endangered Species Act protections for the gray wolves in California, despite the fact that the agency had argued against it. We filed the petition knowing that California has the most protective State Endangered Species Act of any state in the country. It essentially prohibits the killing of state endangered species except in defense of human life. So while wolves are state listed as endangered, killing them for conflicts with livestock is not an option. There are limited circumstances under the Fish and Game Code in which an individual or an agency or an institution could get an incidental take permit for an endangered species, but it requires that that take, by take I mean killing, be fully mitigated. And it also requires the take could not jeopardize the continued existence of the species. Because California's current wolf population is so small, any take could not be fully mitigated, and any take could likely jeopardize the continued existence of the species, which means for now in the foreseeable future, wolves in California are safe from authorized take. That can change as the population increases, but they have a pretty good, firm foundation right now.
Thank you so much for all your work on that. Could you tell us a bit about the California State Wolf Conservation and Management Plan, including please describe problems that exist in the plan?
Yeah, so the plan was adopted by the State Wildlife Agency in 2016. This was after a multi-year process. The plan consists of 2 parts. There is a part 1, which is about a 30-page high-level summary. And then there's a part 2, which is a 308-page document that has all the in-depth content. The agency used a stakeholder advisory body that was composed of conservation groups, livestock industry reps, and sports hunting groups to help advise the agency in crafting the plan. I was one of the stakeholders. The process also involved issuing a draft version out for public review and comment, and holding public meetings and accepting public testimony. And then finally, the agency issued its final versions. You can see December of 2016. Now, unlike Oregon and Washington, California's wolf plan could simply be issued by the state agency. It did not have to go through a formal adoption process by the commission that oversees the agency. And also, unlike Oregon and Washington, the California Wolf Plan does not establish wolf recovery zones. It doesn't chop up the state into zones. Similar to Oregon's, California's Wolf Plan is an adaptive management plan with 3 phases. So moving from phase 1 to 2, and then from phase 2 to phase 3, that depends on the wolf population increasing. And then similar to Oregon, the early phase 1, it's the most protective of wolves. Phase 2 gets a little less protective, and phase 3 is the least protective. And just to let you know what these phases, where their thresholds are, we're in phase 1 right now, and phase 1 exists until there have been 4 successful breeding pairs for 2 consecutive years. Then it moves into phase 2, where things remain until there are 8 successful breeding pairs for 2 consecutive years. Then it moves into phase 3. There's no upper level goals for phase 3, but there's also no population cap, which is good news. And for anyone who's not quite sure what it means to be a successful breeding pair, that's defined as a mated female and male wolf, which have produced pups, at least 2 of which survive all the way through to December 31st of the year that they were born. We'll talk about a few good features of the plan. So again, there's no population cap. That's terrific. We're going to have as many wolves as California can support. We may end up having to fight for that, but that's the way it is right now, and we hope to keep it that way. There's an emphasis on non-lethal methods to prevent and reduce livestock conflicts. And that's in part because they have to emphasize that wolves cannot be killed at this time for livestock conflicts, which provides a really great experiment. You know, what is it like to have wolves return in a state where you can't kill them for conflicts, and where agencies and livestock owners and conservation groups work together to ensure that non-lethal measures are being used so that there can be coexistence and a relationship on the ground. The plan also does not set delisting criteria, which is great. They had initially in their draft proposed considering delisting when wolves were at 50 to 75 wolves, and we talked them out of that. And then they bolstered the final plan with additional current science that they had previously failed to acknowledge. I'm going to go into a list of some of the plan's shortcomings. So the population goals and the time period are too low from transitioning from one phase to the next. We'd like to see there be more successful breeding pairs in each phase for a longer period of years before you move to the next phase. The plan fails to identify habitat conservation or travel corridor conservation priorities for wolves. It doesn't distinguish between public and private lands for in the future. If we get to a place where wolves could be killed for livestock conflicts, we urge them to make it so that wolves could not be killed for conflicts on public lands, or could not be killed on public lands for any conflicts. The plan makes wolves scapegoats for wild ungulate population declines. There's a provision in the plan in phase 3 that would allow for the killing of wolves for wild ungulate population declines. A little complex to get into now, but anyone can read it in the appendix of the plan. And then the plan has limited discussions on the impacts of killing wolves on wolf families themselves and on social tolerance.
So
there are a few more problems, but those are the high points. Yeah.
I apologize.
No.
Okay. There have been over the years in California, over the years in California, some conflicts and predations by wolves on livestock. Recently, we've seen the State Wildlife Agency reporting more conflicts and an apparent uptick in these incidents. Do opportunities exist to advocate for stronger protections for wolves in California, or are we all set because wolves are protected under the state ESA and because of the wolf plan?
So regarding the livestock conflicts, I'm going to describe a new step that the State Wildlife Agency has taken to improve the potential of coexistence with wolves by the livestock industry here. A few years ago, the agency got a bill passed by the state legislature, funded at $3 million for a 3-year pilot project, which will provide funding through 3 prongs. Prong 1 pays compensation to livestock owners for direct wolf-caused losses. If you have livestock that were killed or injured by wolves, and it has been confirmed for a probable wolf-caused loss determined by the agency, you can apply for and get compensation. Prong 2 reimburses livestock owners for non-lethal conflict deterrent methods and tools that they put into place. And then prong 3 is what is called pay for presence. And what it does is it pays livestock owners a percentage of the value per head of livestock if your livestock is grazing in general known wolf territory, and a slightly higher percentage per head if your livestock are grazing in what's called core wolf territory, the portion of the overall territory that the wolves spend a significantly more amount of time in. And so that payment is to offset any stress that your livestock may incur. It could be weight loss. It could be lower reproduction. I actually think it's not stated this way, but I think it also offsets some of the stress that livestock operators experience having wolves living in places where they graze their livestock and they haven't contended with wolves before. I think it's an acknowledgement by the state that when your state law says people can't kill wolves for conflicts, you need to be creative in the solutions that you put forward to help livestock owners accept living with wolves so that they won't kill them illegally. So California is actually the only state I know of that has all three of these prongs in their program. As for your question of if we don't need to worry because of the strong protections, we can acknowledge the strength of the act. We can be proud of California's state ESA, and we can make sure that the state act doesn't get weakened. But at the same time, we can't ever let our guard down. Steph, is probably the one thing you and I have talked about more over the years than anything else, because the same forces that eradicated wolves in the first place, they still exist. And they're still going to do whatever it takes politically to try to undo all the progress that's been made in wolf recovery. So remaining vigilant will always be necessary. It will also be necessary to always push the agencies to incorporate best available science instead of caving to political pressure. This is essential if we are to move the agencies away from focusing on wolf management and towards wolf conservation, coexistence, and as our wonderful speaker this morning said, relationship with wolves. This is as true in California as it is anywhere else.